Greetings, Agmeshwa. This is my submission for the Cursed Conlang submission. I call it Hyper Greek or Zehilinike. No, I actually pronounced that wrong. It's Zahil. You know what? It's not important. Just refer to it as Hyper Greek or Supreme Greek. Any of those names are acceptable. Supreme Greek or Hyper Greek is my submission to the Cursed Conlang submission. The idea was primarily based off the execution of one of your Conlangs, Agmeshwa, Ultra French. I really liked the idea of that whole thing. A normal language that was like corrupted beyond all comprehension, so I've decided for here I would do that for the ancient Greek language. Hyper Greek is, as I've said, based off of ancient Greek. It diverged from the language after the Persians invaded Macedon and the eastern Greece, as you know, like Thrace and all that stuff. And the speakers of Greek went north, like above Dacia or Dacia, don't really know what it's called, and into what is known as the Zenisei Mountains. They became a heavily religious society, like lots of monks, all that stuff, and that really appears in the language, or should I say multiple languages. You know, like Chinese, where the writing system can encode multiple dialects which cannot understand each other. So basically that's the case for Hyper Greek. There is a consonant inventory, though I say that very liberally because Hyper Greek doesn't really have any form of standard phonology. The basic consonants in the standard dialect are ba, ta, sa, ta, ga, ga, ba, ba, da, ria, fa, sa, na, nya, shla, la, cha, and ch. But that's only the basic consonant inventory for the standard dialect. In other dialects, it's a bit more different. I remember a dialect in which all of the stops are a phonemic realization of ka, you know, the uvular stop. Another dialect in which ra or ro is the lateral trill and lambda is the rhotic trill. And there is another dialect in which the voiced, the voiceless, and the aspirated stop are all merged into one stop sound. So that's fun. The vowel inventory is very interesting. Nothing wrong with it. Just a e, e, a, o, u, and o. Now, that does sound a lot like centralized vowels, but I can assure you they have been centralized. And don't worry, Agmeshwa, these are also subject to extreme phonetic variation. In one dialect, the a becomes e before front vowels, e before at the beginning of words, and u at the end of words. The Hyper Greek accent is very different from ancient Greek, and the accent has changed a little bit from ancient Greek, but Hyper Greek accent still falls in the same place. In Hyper Greek, the high tone became a rising tone, the mid tone became a falling tone, and the falling tone became a contour. Accented alpha, epsilon, eta, and omicron became diphthongs. Accented omega, I think that's a iota, and upsilon became long vowels. And also, there are syllabic consonants that can take this rise. And this isn't just sonorants. Obstruents like ta and ka are a part of the syllabic consonant unit. Anything can be a consonant. The main cursed feature of Hypergreek is really its writing system. It's written in the Greek alphabet, but it uses color as a part of its spelling. And different colors represent different pronunciations in word order. Blue represents syllabic consonants, red represents stressed vowels, and magenta represents palatalized consonants, though that's one is rarely used. A stressed vowel has a macron written below it and the original accent written above, so that you can easily read it and have a feeling for what the sound is. Though saying that, because how the accent and vowel is pronounced in different dialects, this only applies for the standard dialect, learner's pronunciation, and the rank system. Color also serves a syntactical purpose, denoting what the subject and object are depending on voice. I have on this PowerPoint sheet all of the syntactical changes for color depending on the voice, and you'll notice immediately that there's an active, the passive, and the middle. All normal ancient Greek tenses, but what isn't normal is the inactive. I'll get around to that later. Oh, and anything that is in a subject or object or a part of this main clause or dependent clause, whatever you like to call it, is written in purple. The syntax is now a key feature of Hypergreek that I really took a lot of pride in, is making sure that the syntax in spoken language is confused and muddled as much as possible. I have an example on the board. Cannot pair ech theai ethai kin zipir ikir spir. I can shuffle that any way I like, and it will be grammatically correct. Like ancient Greek, Hypergreek doesn't really have word order, but this is only worsened by the fact that the nominative, accusative, and the dative case that would usually mark word order are, how do I say this? They've all merged into one case, so have fun figuring out the case without the verb. And it's clear that the monks who wrote the system didn't think about it either, because they decided it was necessary to add constituent suffixes or clause suffixes. Basically, they mark the constituent or clause depending on if it's a main or dependent clause or the order it appears in the sentence. And I should also note that it's a bit random whether this is applied to a constituent or a clause. So, have fun figuring that out. Now, let's go on to nouns. Nouns decline for the same stuff as they do in ancient Greek, with a few extras. So you see the primary cases, you can see the syntactical, which is basically just the nominative, accusative, and dative merged into one case. The vocative, which is used to call out others. Genitive, the possessors, auxiliary verbs, or ablative thingy. They're all still here, but you also get the possessive, which marks the possessum, the thing that's being possessed. The instrumental marks instruments of another noun, and the equative, like you use in similes and metaphors. So these are the new primary cases. Then you also got the secondary cases, which they're basically prepositions. It's a bit of a complicated subject, I'm not gonna lie. But anyway, there are these secondary cases. They include the terminative, marks words at the end of sentences, the upper spatial locative, the temporal benefactive, the causative, the locative allative, the anti-locative, the near-locative, the allative, the higher locative, the lower locative, the basic locative, the commitative, the amid-specific instrumental, the ablative, and the sub-lower locative. So basically, the ablative only takes genitive, and the other cases, they can flip around. Oh, and another thing about the causative case, you can attach it to words to sort of note whether they have eaten a whole grain sandwich with 2 olives, 5 pickles, and some feta within the bounds of Athens. Now you may be wondering, why would someone communicate this really odd and specific function within the language? Because why not? That's why. And for number, well, that's a bit of an interesting one. I thought it would be a good idea to add a few more numbers. So you also have the trial, the quadrille, and they basically mark 3 or 4 objects, says it in the name, and they're mostly derived from the dual. Now that we've gone over nouns, let's go over pronouns. Here are the pronouns. Look at them in all their glory. These are the personal pronouns. There are a lot more. There's also the demonstrative and the distal and proximal demonstrative, the relative pronoun, the indefinite pronoun, and interrogative, all in the correlatives. And basically, I looked at an ancient Greek table which said correlatives, didn't check what the hell a correlative is, and just pasted it in. It may as well be pronouns. So don't mind that feature of the language, and don't question my understanding of linguistics. It is perfect. I know what I'm doing with this. Clauses are marked with conjunctions. Those are basically converbs, so there are probably more converbs in Hypergreek than any other language. How do I know that? I don't. Anyway, here's the most basic conjunctions in Hypergreek. You have kie, which means and or also, imte, which means neither, and ote, which means neither. And how you separate this is that imte is infinitive and ote is indicative. Now, verbs. For verbs, I basically went extra tenses, extra moods, and an extra voice, and conjugations can randomly detach from the verb. So that's lovely. Not. So starting off with verbs. Verbs are now marked for the far future perfect, the recent future perfect, the recent aorist, the recent imperfect, the far aorist, the far imperfect, and the far pluperfect. I don't know how many tenses is that, and I'm not bothering counting them. The far tenses make up the secondary conjugation, so you just add a basic suffix to create these tenses. So they're pretty easy to make, mostly. And here we got the basic conjugations. They're just Greek tenses, but they've been involved into Hypergreek. So you don't really need to know. You could just skim over this. Though I would mention that this is only the first person singular. The top line is active, the middle line is middle, and the third line is passive. So that's something you should keep in mind. And the moods, so we still have the 4 primary moods, like the indicative, the subjunctive, the optative, and the imperative, but we also have the jussive, the conditional, the volitive, the ablative, the inferential, the interrogative. I forgot to put a subtitle here. Don't mind that. And here we got the voice. So basically, how you distinguish this new inactive voice? So it's basically a passive, but it's used when you have the agent in the sentence. If you don't have the agent, you need to use the passive. The inactive voice is marked with me. Quite simple. And here is the outer conjugations. This basically summarizes all of the Greek verb thingies. And now we have the translation. I am not going to pronounce any of this. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to explain even more of the grammar. So in the first sentence, the line is blessed the majestic serpent. And you might notice something is off, or maybe you haven't. So this is the object. This means majestic servant. I forgot to skim over this, but adjectives cling on to nouns sometimes. It's a bit unpredictable. And this is how the verb conjugation detaches from the actual verb stem. You also get to see some of these constituent suffixes, but so because we're only dealing with one clause, we only need one of these. Then we have the second sentence. So I translated, surely it won't weave itself into Lumifera and coil and death and rebirth all into one sentence. So remember when I said there is no word order, no syntax? I meant there was no syntax. There is no common constituent. The only way constituents are marked are through the suffixes. And you may notice through the constituent suffixes that all of the words are scattered around. So that's a feature I really like about Hypergreek. The third sentence is, it begins with seuse. So when you got a personal noun like this, you're supposed to put it in all blue. It's like a formal term. And you see the vocative here. And I should also mention that Zeus is interpreted in Hypergreek as most supreme. In the second sentence, we also have in Hufinodut an omega. So you would think that this is the negative, by the way. You would think this is just pronounced O. But in some dialects, it's pronounced meh, sometimes nah. It's a bit random. And this is the reason why I don't want to do a spoken pronunciation, because again, Hypergreek doesn't really have any form of reasonable phonology or common spoken vocabulary. This is the only thing that unifies it. In the third sentence, you also see the subject and the object all in one sentence. So one of these is the subject, and one of these is the object. I actually forgot what the color system for this is, but that doesn't matter. And in the fourth sentence, you may notice that a lot of this, it begins in prai, which notes that it is in fact a dependent clause, not a main clause. Now, this is the part of the fourth sentence where it says, with its fangs going into it, just blah blah blah. And basically, that's a show of how dependent clauses work. If I don't understand how this works, I'm new to Kalangan, guys. And also, in the fourth sentence, you get to see this syllabic tau. So that's cool. In the fifth sentence, you see a separated verb conjugation again with it drinks. So you see to, that's basically the third person prefix. It is derived from the definite articles, which have now become prefixes or suffixes to nouns, whether it is a prefix or a suffix depends on whether you feel like it. In the fifth sentence, or the first sentence, because this makes up the second part, I thought it would be best to add in it is. So for the word to be, you're not supposed to include the person suffix there. You're supposed to leave blank. So it's deep here. So this whole sentence translates to, it is a beast that is both devourer and devoured. And it is a whisper swallowed by its own echo. So you see this isetoi, that denotes a relative linker. So you see the is, where you go back to correlatives, and it says is. This makes up the isetoi. Here, because tail eater actually translates to Ouroboros, which I know is what you based the meme translation off, that whole endless infinity snake. I thought it would be fitting that I would translate tail eater as into the name for Ouroboros in Hypergreek, which is let me try and pronounce this. Ouroboros. yeah, don't expect me to make a full translation of this. If I get disqualified, I am very sorry. And in this last sentence, so at the end you have a Picurdio Tion, which I'm probably missing a few words, don't mind me. That translates the last part of the phrase in my heart and the heart of the world. So I translate that as in all hearts. So the pa at the beginning of the sentence actually means all. So it's like a prefix. And that concludes Hyper Greek.